Even though I have been training since I was 13, I only learned how to train properly in 2021 when I was about 21, maybe 22 years old. Before that time, I was doing random routines. I had no idea about diet, and because of that, my physique was bang average. Now, I see transformations on Instagram all the time, and only Allah knows if what they're saying is real, but they're usually 1 to 3 year transformations. And every time I see one of these videos, I just think of how far ahead I could have been, even if I had started training correctly just 1, 2, maybe even 3 years earlier than I initially did. Now, luckily for you, I'll tell you exactly about the changes I made, which made me aesthetic, which made me lose more than 20 pounds of fat, and which healed my skin issues too. Now, in terms of training, the changes I made was I started training purely for aesthetics. Now, aesthetics means purely for the reason of looking good in terms of maximizing your angles and in terms of just looking good. Of course, there's functional training and whatever else you want to call it, if that's even a thing. But we started training for aesthetics. Now, what I mean by aesthetics is you focus on certain muscles. Now, these certain muscles, which I can tell you about, is your neck and your traps, your side delts, your upper chest, your upper lats, as well as your abs. But your abs is more of a body fat percentage. When you kind of lean down to around 15 to 12% body fat, your abs start popping. But those are the things I started focusing on the most. That's not to say, I didn't train my triceps or my biceps, because I didn't really mention that. I still trained my arms, I still trained everything else, which I didn't really mention, but the focus was mostly on them muscles. Now, compared to, say, for example, let's just say a 5x5 program. A 5x5 program, you're purely focusing on moving the weight. You're not really focusing on looking better. I did bro splits, I did push-pull legs, I did random other routines, but I felt like sometimes there were too much volume, and even if I was tinkering around with the amount of exercises, the amount of sets and the reps, I just felt like the routine I have right now is the best one in terms of recovery, in terms of sets, in terms of reps, in terms of how much energy I have throughout the workouts. So I started focusing on the aesthetic muscles, as I said, and I basically made my own routine. Now, yeah, all routines work, but as long as you focus on the muscles, which I said, and you stay within 5 to 20 sets per body part per week, you'll have the most results. Do you get from 20 to 30, you can get a little bit more in terms of, gains, in terms of strength, but you would have to do a lot more from 20 to 30 compared to 5 to 20. That would be your highest ROI. You could get, technically, in theory, you could get a little bit more gains, but it wouldn't be worth it. It would not be worth it. Now, another thing to remember when it comes to training is always focus on progressive overload. Now, that is the most important thing. There's been literal seasons in my life where I've kind of just gone through the motions at the gym, where I've not really focused on progressive overload. If I felt really strong and the weight was just lifting so easily, I would naturally just, lift heavier weight. But if I didn't push myself, there were times where I literally didn't not remember to push myself, and that also held me back because I was leaving gains on the table. And now, what I mean by progressive overload and training hard, what I mean is for nearly every exercise, at the end of your last set, you want to have literally nothing left in the tank. Like, you could not do any more reps. Now, the way I like doing this is I train with a partner. You can get any person in the gym that you see and ask them to basically spot you, but tell them to spot you in such a way where they basically get to a point where you can no longer push the weight up, where they assist you in that part of the motion. But on the way down, you're lowering the weight. On the eccentric part, you're fully lowering the weight. Now, once you get to a point where you cannot even lower the weight on your own, then that's fine. That is that's your threshold. You've literally hit failure. You want to do that for pretty much every exercise you do. At the end of the last set, you want to go to failure, because that's when real growth appears. That's when you have literally nothing left in the tank. You go home, you get your protein in, and that over the long term will allow you to make a lot more gains. But for me, I wasn't really doing that. I was always leaving, 3 or 4 3 or 4 reps in the tank. And I just was not growing. I wasn't making progress. I was stuck on the same weight. Now, if you're someone who's been stuck on the same weight on a certain exercise for a very long time, then you're not training hard enough. you're literally not training hard enough. Because if you were training hard enough, you would progress. Unless you get to a really high weight in a certain exercise, like you're like at 200 kilograms, that's when you've reached a kind of limit. And then at that point, there's different things you can do to make the exercises harder. Like you can do it a bit slower. You can have more reps. You can have more sets. But that's all different. You always want to focus on progressive overload. Now that's the most important thing when it comes to training. You're training for aesthetics. You want to hit the ideal volume, and you want to focus on progressive overload. Now the next thing, and in my opinion, the most important thing when it comes to fitness, when it comes to health, when it comes to diet, is diet. Now what I did was I started doing intermittent fasting. Now for a very long time in my life, I kind of involuntarily did intermittent fasting, but when I started learning how to train, and when I wanted to actually improve my health, I started fasting. So let's just say I started eating from 2 p.m. till 10 p.m. Now that's not to say within them 8 hours I was just binging and I was just eating whatever I want. I would have one meal at 2 p.m. So technically my breakfast, which is when I was breaking my fast, I would eat at 2 p.m. and then at 8 p.m. I would have another meal. So that would be my lunch. Sorry, not my lunch, my dinner. And then in between them times of 2 and 8, if I was feeling really hungry, around 5 or 6, something like that, I would have a protein shake, or I would have some kind of protein pancakes. When you join my school community, you get a free protein pancake recipe, so make sure you join that. What intermittent fasting allowed me to do and allowed my body to do was it lowered my insulin because I wasn't always eating. Now, when you're always eating and always consuming carbohydrates and certain things, now when you're always eating, you become insulin resistant. And what insulin resistance does is it puts you in fat storage mode. And you will find it near enough impossible to lose weight if your insulin is very high. So when I started eating less frequently, that's not to be mistaken with I was eating less. I was still eating the correct amount of calories I needed to eat in order for me to lose weight. Lowering my insulin was a big thing for me. It was a big thing because it allowed a lot of other things in my body to kind of sort themselves out. Like I had a lot less inflammation. I had a lot less brain fog. I had a lot more energy. I was losing weight, which obviously it made me look better, it improved my confidence. And insulin resistance is a very, 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 I wouldn't say unknown, but it's a very tricky thing if you're not aware of what it is, because you might be trying to lose weight and you're thinking to yourself, why can I not lose weight? Such and such a person, they've dieted for a month or 2 months and they've lost a bunch of weight. Why can I not do that? The thing is, it's your insulin. Insulin is very important, especially for brown guys as well, because our diet is all full of carbohydrates and it's just full of processed foods, full of seed oils, and all of that is like a big pot of disaster when it comes to insulin, because it will keep you in fat storage mode. So what you can do is, and what I did was, I started consuming a lot more protein. I started having about a lot more protein, but in terms to put a number on it, I would say 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So, for example, say you're 200 pounds, then aim for around 200 grams of protein at the max. Now, there's another formula you could do as well, which is 1 gram of protein per centimeter in height. Now, it just depends on whatever you're comfortable with. Say, for example, for you to have 1 gram per centimeter in height is more easily doable. You know how much amount of protein you need to eat, like me. Now, if you prefer having one of the formula over the other one, then by all means stick to that one, because fitness, gym, everything, it's all about putting the reps in, doing whatever's sustainable for you. If someone else prefers something else, and don't feel like you have to do that same thing as well. Choose something that works for you and just stick to it. And another thing on insulin was, I forgot to mention, I stopped consuming a lot of seed oil. So what I did was, my mom would cook the meals for me, and she would cook the meals in this big pot, right? And let's just say she made some kind of chicken. In the dish, I would basically drain out all of the soup, because it was more or less just seed oil. I would just try and do little small things like that, because that's when I started getting educated about seed oils and the dangers of the seed oils. So I did that, and I've known there's no doubt in my mind that that also helped towards my fat loss, because seed oils on their own, they're poison. They're poison as well. And I also tried to restrict carbohydrates, because my insulin, I realized my insulin was unregulated. It wasn't, working properly. And carbohydrates spike insulin the most compared to fats and proteins. So I reduced my carbohydrate intake. I reduced my seed oil intake. I consumed more protein, and I started eating less frequently. I was still eating the right amount of calories, but I just was not snacking constantly and spiking my insulin. Now, those 4 things on their own made a massive difference, and it will make a massive difference to you as well. It's not very, in my opinion, it's not very hard, but you just need someone to take you through your own transformation. And if that's someone like you want me to take you through the transformation and basically speed run you through the whole process in 3 months, then join my free school community and head over to the classroom tab to find out more. Thank you.